I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The order moved through Sandringham before sunrise, quiet, final, and impossible to misunderstand. By the time the household gathered, Prince Harry's portrait had disappeared from the family gallery. Only a pale rectangle remained, where his face had watched over years of Christmas gatherings and private grief. King Charles had not passed the decision to an advisor. He had signed it himself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the command would cut deeper than any cancelled invitation. Sandringham, the monarch's privately owned country residence, was not simply another royal building. It held family Christmases, mourning rituals, inherited memories, and moments that belonged to the Windsors long before public duty tore father and son apart. Removing Harry from that house meant removing him from the family's most personal record. Two senior employees entered the gallery shortly after dawn wearing white gloves and carrying a padded case. One steadied the frame while the other lifted it from the wall. Neither spoke. When the metal hook appeared, a senior courtier ordered that removed too. The instruction was precise. Leave no fixture, no label, no sign that the portrait was expected to return. The king received confirmation at his desk. He read the message once, placed it face down, and stared toward the window without speaking. No satisfaction crossed his face. No relief softened him. Charles looked wounded, yet resolved, as though he had chosen a punishment that would injure him almost as deeply as the son it targeted. The order itself allowed no comforting explanation. It did not mention renovation, rotation, cleaning, or temporary storage. Harry's portrait was to be secured and kept away unless the monarch personally reversed the decision. That language transformed a household adjustment into a royal judgment. The Duke had not merely lost access to a room or ceremony. His image had been removed from a home built around blood, memory, and belonging. The timing made the silence more dangerous. Only hours earlier, Charles had received a confidential written account of a recent private exchange involving Harry. The file recorded the conversation, the disputed words, and the moment trust appeared to collapse. The king read it alone. Soon afterward, his signed instruction reached Sandringham that cold morning. Staff members understood that something larger had broken. They lowered their voices. They avoided the gallery. Yet before the household could absorb the empty space, a discreet call was placed across the distance to Harry. The frame had already been taken away, but the deeper wound would open only when the son heard what his father had done. For the public, the missing portrait looked like royal punishment. For Charles and Harry, it carried something far more painful. That image belonged to a time when father and son could still stand beside each other without hesitation. Removing it did not erase a photograph. It cut through one of the last visible links to a family life both men had already lost. Harry received the news during a private morning call. At first, he assumed the frame had been moved for repairs. Then the voice on the line explained that the order had come directly from Charles. The Duke of Sussex, the title given to the king's younger son, stopped speaking. He rose from the table, walked into another room, and left the call connected behind him. The silence said everything. Harry had survived public criticism, lost royal duties, and learned to live beyond the palace's daily control. Yet the thought of his childhood image being boxed away inside Sandringham struck at something deeper. The removal did not challenge his status alone. It challenged whether he was still remembered as a son. Charles carried a different burden. As monarch, he had to protect the institution from private conflict spilling into public damage. As a father, he knew every official decision would wound someone he had once held close. That was why Sandringham mattered. The house was tied to Christmas mornings, family mourning, and memories formed before duty hardened every relationship. The king passed the empty space later that day. He slowed for one step, then continued. A courtier noticed his hand tighten around the papers he carried. Charles did not look back, but the strain in his grip betrayed what his face refused to show. William learned the full details soon afterward. Prince William, the heir expected to become the next king, had been warned that a major household change was coming. He had not been told Harry's portrait would disappear. When the news reached him, the prince asked only one question. Had their father signed the order himself? The answer left him silent. Camilla had warned Charles before the command was issued. Queen Camilla, the king's wife and senior royal partner, told him privately that removing the portrait would be understood as more than discipline. She feared the empty wall would become a symbol of exile, and that once the family changed what it displayed, reconciliation would become harder to imagine. Still, Charles refused to reverse course. His grief had not softened the decision. It had hardened it. To understand why the king accepted such a brutal cost, the family had to return to the private incident that turned disappointment into final resolve. The portrait had not disappeared because of distant resentment alone. One conversation changed everything. What began as a cautious attempt to reopen the doors of Sandringham became a bitter test of trust, belonging, and control. By the time the call ended, Charles no longer believed he was negotiating with a wounded son. He believed he was confronting a risk the monarchy could no longer ignore. Charles had authorized a private channel to explore whether Harry could attend the next Christmas gathering without public duties, formal appearances, or press involvement. Sandringham Christmas was the royal family's private holiday tradition, when relatives gathered away from official ceremonies and state business. The proposal was narrow, but it mattered because it offered the Duke a path back into family life without restoring his former royal role. Harry listened as the conditions were explained. The visit required discretion, respectful contact, and a clear promise that conversations inside the residence would remain private. He heard those terms not as protection, but as accusation. To him, every condition suggested that the family saw a threat before it saw a son. The tension broke during a direct telephone conversation. Harry told Charles that he would not return merely to be treated as a guest under supervision. The king replied that trust had to be rebuilt before privilege could be restored. His words were calm, but the meaning was severe. Family access would no longer be separated from responsibility. Harry pushed back. He argued that every attempt at reconciliation arrived wrapped in palace control. The Duke believed the rules reduced him from a prince with shared memories to a security problem requiring management. Charles heard something different. He heard a demand for emotional access without any willingness to protect the people granting it. The call sharpened. Charles asked whether Harry could guarantee that no private details from the gathering would later reach the public. Silence followed. Then the Duke said he would not accept conditions built on an assumption of guilt. The monarch removed his glasses, placed them beside the telephone, and ended the conversation without another word. The next morning brought the true point of no return. Charles received a documented summary of the call, alongside records of earlier private exchanges that had later surfaced outside the family. The written account did not merely capture one argument. It showed a pattern the king could no longer dismiss as misunderstanding. Charles read the file twice. Then he took his pen and wrote one sentence in the margin: "Remove the portrait from the family gallery." That handwritten order became the foundation of the formal command. But before the frame could disappear, William entered the conflict. The future king understood that removing Harry's image would not simply punish a brother. It could permanently reshape the family itself. Charles had written the command, but William was not prepared to let the portrait vanish without forcing his father to face what the act truly meant. William entered his father's private sitting room without aides, secretaries, or prepared language. He closed the door himself. The future king understood the danger at once. Removing Harry's portrait might protect royal authority, but it could also announce that the family no longer believed one of its own could return. Charles refused to withdraw the command. William refused to leave quietly. The prince carried anger of his own. Harry had disappointed him, challenged him, and forced wounds into public view. Yet William also understood that Sandringham's family gallery was more than a collection of photographs. It served as a private record of who belonged, who had endured, and who remained part of the family story, even after trust had cracked. William placed a copy of the order on the table. "Are you removing a portrait?" he asked. "Or are you removing your son?" Charles looked directly at him. The king did not blink. "I am removing a fiction," he replied. The words landed hard. William argued that royal walls preserved painful history as well as proud history. He warned that taking Harry down might look decisive inside the palace but fearful outside it. A strong monarchy, he said, should not need to erase evidence of its own fracture. Charles tightened his jaw. He had spent years trying to separate forgiveness from surrender, and patience from weakness. The monarch said a father could not keep offering trust when every boundary was treated as an insult. His voice remained controlled until the final sentence. "Love does not require blindness," he said, "and duty does not permit it." William stepped closer, but Charles opened a folder before the prince could answer. The file contained a documented account of the Christmas call, meaning a written record prepared from the private exchange and preserved for senior review. The king did not hand over the entire document. He selected one paragraph and pushed it across the table. William read it once, then again. The future king's posture changed. He did not approve of the removal, and he did not excuse the pain it would cause. But he stopped demanding that the order be cancelled. Whatever appeared in that paragraph convinced him that Charles was acting from more than wounded pride. Charles picked up a fountain pen and signed the execution copy. The scratch of the nib became the only sound in the room. William watched until the monarch set the pen down. The confrontation ended without agreement. Yet the hidden paragraph had changed the balance. Someone inside the royal system believed Harry represented not only a family wound, but an ongoing threat to the institution's control. The portrait was the visible punishment, but behind it stood a quieter machinery of power that had already judged Harry to be a continuing royal risk. Charles had issued the order, but the pressure behind it had been gathering for weeks. Private offices had raised concerns. Security advisors had warned of exposure. Family discussions had ended without agreement. By the time the king signed his name, Harry's portrait was no longer being treated as decoration. It had become a statement of trust the palace no longer believed it could defend. Senior officials argued that the family gallery carried meaning beyond sentiment. A prominent portrait inside the sovereign's private home suggested continued confidence, belonging, and access. Sandringham remained under Charles's personal authority, unlike ceremonial royal spaces managed through public arrangements. That meant the monarch needed no parliamentary approval or committee vote. The wall was his responsibility, and the final choice was his alone. Camilla sat with Charles after the confidential security briefing. Queen Camilla, the king's wife and closest royal partner, noticed that his tea had gone cold without being touched. She asked whether he was truly prepared to walk past the empty space every day and remember why it was there. The queen consort did not defend Harry's conduct. She understood the anger, the broken trust, and the fear that another private conversation could become public property. Still, she warned Charles that decisions made in pain could later disguise themselves as principle. By punishing his son, she said, he might also be building a daily punishment for himself. Charles did not deny it. The king admitted that leaving the portrait in place had begun to feel dishonest. Each time he saw Harry's face, he remembered a closeness that no longer existed, and a loyalty he could not pretend remained untouched. To him, the image promised unity, while the family lived through division. The security assessment made the risk harder to ignore. A confidential briefing, meaning a restricted document prepared for senior royal review, warned that any future Sandringham visit involving Harry could expose private conversations, staff identities, and internal family routines. The concern was not one argument. It was a pattern. Charles then extended the instruction. Staff were ordered to review every private family area where Harry's image appeared, though no further portrait could be removed without the monarch's separate approval. The king wanted control, not chaos. Charles rejected one final proposal. An advisor suggested replacing the missing portrait immediately with another family photograph. He refused. The space would remain empty. The absence itself would carry the truth. When Harry learned that decision, silence no longer felt protective. It felt like surrender. The palace had chosen an empty wall, but the Duke was about to answer with words that could make the private rupture impossible to contain. Harry did not answer with an immediate public attack. His first reaction was more personal, and far more dangerous. He requested a direct conversation with Charles, only to be told that the king would not revisit the decision that day. That refusal turned shock into anger. The missing portrait now felt like years of rejection, compressed into one brutal message. The family home would preserve his absence more carefully than his place within it. Sandringham's staff received strict instructions within hours. No one was to discuss the removal, photograph the empty wall, or confirm where the frame had been stored. The order protected the household from leaks, but it also deepened the secrecy surrounding Harry. His image had vanished, and now even the details of that disappearance were being locked away. Harry received a second message from Charles's office. A future private call remained possible, but the portrait order could not be challenged through advisors or intermediaries. The Duke of Sussex, the title held by the king's younger son, understood the meaning immediately. His father would speak to him later, but the decision itself was closed. Harry entered a quiet room and shut the door. He reread the message several times, gripping his telephone until his hand began to ache. Then he dictated a furious reply, accusing the palace of cruelty and control. He listened to the words once. Before sending them, he deleted every line. Meghan found him seated in silence. He told her that losing the portrait felt different from losing a role, because the frame belonged to the family, not the institution. The Duchess of Sussex, Harry's wife and closest partner, understood that distinction. She urged him not to respond while anger was choosing his words. Meghan warned that any public attack would be used to justify Charles's decision. Harry argued that silence could look like surrender. The disagreement sharpened until he opened a blank document and began drafting a formal declaration, accusing the palace of rewriting family history. The statement was explosive. One sentence alone could have triggered another royal crisis. William intervened before it was released. The prince sent Harry a private message containing only 6 words. Do not make the wall permanent. The warning suggested that public retaliation would destroy whatever possibility of repair still remained between father and son. Then the final notice arrived. Exploratory plans for Harry to attend the next Sandringham Christmas gathering were formally closed. He read the message, placed it beside the unsent statement, and stared at both documents. Harry now faced a choice between striking back and protecting one final connection. He deleted nothing more. Instead, he contacted William and asked for a conversation without aides, courtiers, or official records. For the first time since the portrait disappeared, the conflict moved away from commands and declarations and returned to 2 brothers speaking without protection. There was no palace table between them, and no official waiting to record what was said. William and Harry spoke privately, without prepared language or advisors standing nearby. The conversation did not repair years of resentment. It did something more immediate. It forced both brothers to admit that the empty space at Sandringham represented a loss neither of them truly wanted. William agreed to the call on one condition. Neither brother would record it, brief anyone afterward, or allow fragments of the exchange to reach the public. The prince wanted honesty without institutional protection. Harry accepted because, for once, he needed to hear his brother's voice rather than another carefully written message from a royal office. William began with Sandringham. He reminded Harry of childhood Christmases, long family walks, private jokes, and the years when their futures seemed tied together. The house mattered because it held memories from before titles became weapons, and before every disagreement carried public consequences. Harry listened, then asked the question he had been holding back. Did you support removing it? William paused. The silence stretched long enough to feel like an answer. Then the future king spoke with painful precision. I understood it. I did not want it. The distinction struck Harry harder than open condemnation. He admitted that the portrait mattered, because it proved there had once been a version of him the family displayed with pride. Its removal made him feel that even his past had been rejected, not merely the choices he had made later. William did not soften the truth. The heir said the family was not trying to erase Harry's childhood. They were responding to the man he had become and to the trust broken through repeated conflict. The prince's words carried no cruelty, but they offered no escape either. Then William revealed something Charles had kept private. The portrait had not been destroyed. It had been wrapped, catalogued, and placed in secure storage under the king's direct authority. The monarch had also left written instructions stating that the image could return only after a direct reconciliation between father and son, with firm boundaries protecting private family conversations. Harry looked toward the drafted statement accusing the palace of rewriting history. For several seconds, neither brother spoke. Then the Duke deleted the document permanently while William remained on the line. The decision prevented another public explosion, but it did not stop the story. Outside the family, people were already asking why the portrait had vanished and what the pale rectangle on Sandringham's wall truly meant. Harry had chosen restraint in private, yet one missing image was about to become the most powerful royal symbol of the year. The palace had removed the portrait before sunrise, hoping the decision would remain trapped behind private walls. By evening, that hope had collapsed. A description of the pale rectangle inside Sandringham moved through broadcasts, newspaper offices, and crowded public spaces. The dispute was no longer about a frame. It had become a national argument over whether the monarchy could protect its authority by removing one of its own. A household source confirmed through a documented account that the order had come directly from Charles. Sandringham was the sovereign's privately owned country residence, meaning the king controlled its family rooms without public approval. That detail mattered because the removal could not be blamed on a committee, an advisor, or routine maintenance. The choice belonged to him. Supporters of Charles called the order a necessary boundary after years of broken trust. Defenders of Harry called it emotional exile. Each side saw the same empty space and found a different meaning. Discipline to one, rejection to the other. The next morning delivered the image that fixed the scandal in public memory. A major national newspaper placed Sandringham's gates across its front page beneath the headline, "The King's Empty Wall." A smaller line declared, "Harry's portrait removed by direct order of his father." The words transformed a private family wound into an international judgment. An evening broadcaster pushed the meaning even further. During a special royal program, the presenter described the removal as the moment a private family fracture became part of the monarchy's permanent visual history. That framing spread quickly, because it captured what the palace statement avoided saying. Visitors gathered outside Sandringham soon afterward. One woman placed a small framed photograph of two young princes beside the roadside barrier. Another visitor quietly removed it and said the family deserved privacy. Their brief disagreement mirrored the larger conflict now dividing the public. Charles saw the newspaper at breakfast. The king studied the headline, folded the front page inward, and asked that no television be turned on. He had wanted the decision to stand without spectacle. Instead, the empty wall had become louder than any official announcement. Harry watched the same broadcast. The Duke felt every comment reopening the humiliation, but he honored his promise to William. He released no accusation, even as strangers debated whether he still belonged in royal memory. A brief palace statement confirmed that displays inside private royal residences were determined by the sovereign. It neither denied the removal nor attacked Harry. Charles intended the order to remain firm, controlled, and final. The world had turned the missing portrait into a verdict, but the true judgment would come in silence, between a father who drew the boundary and a son who finally understood its cost. The removal of Harry's portrait did not end with triumph, revenge, or reconciliation. It ended with clarity. Charles had chosen to stop displaying an image of family unity that no longer reflected the truth. Harry had chosen not to answer humiliation with another public attack. Between those decisions stood an empty wall, painful but honest, marking the exact point where love remained possible even though trust had not yet returned. The order remained in force. Prince Harry's portrait stayed inside secure storage, meaning a protected private archive controlled by the royal household. Charles did not reverse his command, and the Duke did not demand restoration through public pressure. Sandringham's family gallery was quietly reorganized, but the pale space remained untouched for the rest of the season. Its emptiness preserved the weight of what had happened. Charles returned to the gallery several nights later, after the household had fallen silent. The king stopped before the bare wall and raised one hand toward the place where his son's image had once hung. He held it there for a moment. Then the monarch lowered it without touching anything. The decision had protected the boundaries of the crown, the institution represented by the sovereign, and the duties carried in its name. Yet Charles could not pretend the act had brought satisfaction. Authority had demanded firmness. Fatherhood had demanded hope. He had chosen the first, but the second still wounded him. Harry faced the same loss across the distance. The Duke opened a private family album and found a smaller copy of the removed portrait. He studied the image, closed the book carefully, and returned it to the shelf. He did not destroy it. He did not hide it. The memory remained, even though his place inside the present had changed. William's intervention had prevented another public rupture. The prince had not repaired the brothers' relationship, but he had protected one vital line between them. They could still speak before anger became irreversible. That fragile contact mattered because silence had already done enough damage. The portrait's removal was not the final banishment of a prince. It was the end of pretending that affection could replace trust. Charles established the boundary. Harry accepted its reality by refusing to retaliate. The monarchy chose a colder form of honesty. It stopped hiding fracture behind family photographs and accepted the pain of showing what had been lost. The preserved frame meant memory. The empty wall meant consequence. The wall was empty. The order was final, and the message was unmistakable. Within the House of Windsor, blood could preserve love, but only trust could restore belonging. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.